Somewhere along the way, we were given a timeline. Finish school by this age. Build your career by this age. Have it figured out by this age. And if you find yourself at 40 starting something new, the world has a word for that. Late. But what if the world is wrong? This is Greg, 41 years old, Portland, Oregon. For 14 years, Greg taught high school history. He was good at it. His students remembered him. The kind of teacher who made dead events feel like they mattered. But somewhere in his late 30s, Greg felt a shift. Not a crisis, not a breakdown. Just a quiet, persistent feeling that he had more to give than what the classroom could hold. He had an idea for a business, a small consulting firm helping nonprofits tell their stories better. Work that used everything he knew about history, narrative, human motivation. He spent 2 years thinking about it, telling himself he was too old to start, that the people who built things from scratch were 23 and relentless and had nothing to lose. He was 41. He had a mortgage, a daughter in middle school, a life that was stable in a way that felt both safe and quietly suffocating. The moment came on an ordinary Friday afternoon. A student named Dara stayed behind after class. She wanted advice about whether to take a risk on a creative path or play it safe with something more practical. Greg sat with her for 40 minutes, told her that the safe path was not always the one that looked safe from the outside. That regret had a cost too, that she was young enough to try and resilient enough to recover if it didn't work. Dara left looking lighter. Greg sat alone in the empty classroom and realized he had just given a 17-year-old advice he had been refusing to take himself for 2 years. He drove home that evening and told his wife, Sandra, everything he had been carrying quietly. The idea, the fear, the feeling of running out of time. Sandra listened and then said something simple. She said, "Greg, you have been teaching people how to understand the past for 14 years. Maybe it is time to start building something for the future." He did not sleep much that night, but for the first time in 2 years, it was not because of anxiety. It was because something in him had finally been given permission to take up space. I want to say something here that I genuinely believe. The fear of starting over at 40 is not really about age, it is about visibility. When you are young and you fail, it is expected. It is even admired sometimes. You were brave enough to try. When you are 40 and you fail, it feels like evidence. Evidence that you misread yourself, that you should have known better, that the life you had was the life you deserved. Greg was not afraid of failing. He was afraid of what failing at 40 would say about him. That distinction mattered, because once he saw it clearly, he could also see that it was not a reason. It was a story. And stories can be rewritten. Greg had taken his students on a field trip once to see the sequoias in Northern California. He remembered standing at the base of one, looking up and asking the ranger how old it was. About 1,400 years, the ranger said. Greg asked what the first 100 years looked like. The ranger smiled. Like any other tree, she said. Small, unremarkable. Nothing about the first 100 years would tell you what was coming. Greg thought about that standing in his home office 14 years later. The sequoia did not become extraordinary by starting fast. It became extraordinary by not stopping. He was 41 years old. If he lived to 80, he had 39 years left to grow something. That was not late. That was the first 100 years of something that had not yet shown what it was going to become. Greg did not have a mentor. He had a notebook, a wife who believed in him, and 4 principles he kept coming back to every time the doubt was louder than the direction. The first principle: start while you are still afraid. Greg had been waiting for the fear to subside before he began. What he learned was that the fear does not subside before you start. It subsides because you start. Every day he waited, the fear did not shrink. It grew a little, fed by an action, convinced by the silence that it was right to be afraid. He set a date, told 3 people, made it real before he felt ready. Ready, he had finally understood, was not a feeling that arrived. It was a decision you made in the absence of the feeling. The second principle: use what you already have. Greg had spent 2 years looking at what he lacked. The technical skills, the network, the energy of someone 20 years younger. His wife suggested he try the other direction. Look at what 14 years of teaching had given him. He knew how to read an audience, How to take something complex and make it clear. How to tell a story that made people lean forward. How to stay calm in a room that wasn't going his way. These were not small things. These were the things most young entrepreneurs spent years trying to learn. He was not starting from zero. He was starting from 14 years of relevant experience in a different context. The third principle: redefine what success looks like in year one. Greg had been comparing his imagined first year to the highlight version of other people's fifth year. His mentor, a woman named Carol who had started her own firm at 44, told him to define success for year one in terms he could actually control. Not revenue, not clients. Learn, connect, build. Did you learn what the market actually needed? Did you connect with 3 people who could open a door? Did you build something, anything, that did not exist before you started? If yes, year one was a success. Everything else was ahead of schedule. The fourth principle: let your age be an asset, not an apology. Greg had been treating his age like something to overcome, something to explain away in conversations with younger founders and clients. Carol reframed it. She said, "Your clients are not looking for someone who has never made a mistake. They are looking for someone who has made enough of them to know which ones matter." Trust is built on track record, and track record requires time. You have time. It just happened to accumulate in a different room than the one you are walking into now. 15 months after that Friday afternoon, Greg's consulting firm has 4 clients. Not 40. 4. But 4 real ones. Organizations whose work he believes in, whose stories he is genuinely helping to tell. He still teaches 1 class per week, partly for the income, partly because he is not ready to let it go entirely, and partly because standing in front of students feels different now. He is no longer teaching from a place of quiet suffocation. He is teaching from a place of someone who took his own advice. His daughter asked him recently, "Dad, are you happier now?" He thought about it honestly, then said, "I am more myself now, which I think is better than happy." She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. The sequoia, in year 15, still looks like any other tree, but the roots are deeper now, and the roots are everything. It is not too late. I know that sounds like something people say to make you feel better, but I mean it differently. It is not too late, because the timeline you were given was never yours to begin with. It belonged to a version of success someone else defined for a life that was not yours. 40 is not the end of the story. It is, for some people, the first chapter that actually sounds like them. If Greg's story felt like something you have been postponing, drop the word "grow" in the comments. And if you know someone who has been told it is too late to start something that matters to them, send them this. Mindshift Tales. Shift your mind. Change your life.